What are the seven streams of publishing revenues?
Yes. Okay. So when you're talking about your copyright, there are so many ways to make money, but there are 7 main streams of publishing revenue. And performance royalties, I work for a performing rights organization, that's 1 of 7. It can be the most lucrative if you have a song at radio, or if your song is used a lot in television and films that are played on TV. But basically, when your song is performed or played publicly in a public broadcast medium, so radio, television, performed in a club, a hotel, a restaurant, that all falls under performing rights revenue. But when you talk about your song being someone buying a physical CD or downloading it at iTunes or on CD Baby, that's a mechanical royalty, because now they have the mechanical reproduction of your song and can play it whenever they like, versus it being publicly broadcast at the sort of discretion of the radio station. There's sync revenue, and that's where, like, from the production company, they will pay you a sync fee and say, hey, we want to pay $500 for 4 weeks for the use in this commercial or something like that. And then every time it airs, you generate performance royalties, excuse me. And then there is, what did I say? Derivatives. So, print, with everything that's happening with the Robin Thicke song right now, basically Marvin Gaye's estate would be making, derivative income off of this new song. Grand rights, that's in, yeah. I shouldn't have brought that song up. But grand rights in theater, on Broadway and things like that, and then print, which is actually still very viable when it comes to pop music that's being played, whether it's an orchestra or band or what have you. And then new media, which is now media, which is everything that basically doesn't fall under one of those other 6. Yeah, so I mean, there are so many ways to make money and diversify, but you really have to educate yourself on it, because I will have people that'll call and say, hey, my song's been downloaded 50 times on iTunes, why am I not getting a check from SESAC? And it's 2 totally different things. So again, it's really, really important to educate yourself on that, because even if you have a manager, an attorney, all these different pieces of your team, you can't set an expectation or have a realistic conversation if you don't even really know what you're talking about. So, learn the business.
Excellent, thank you. Record company piece.
Well, I think, could you go back to the first slide before? Yeah.
This one?
So I think a lot of you seem to be, by show of hands earlier, digital startup entrepreneurs. So I'm sure one of the questions that you're wondering as you're sitting out there is, I want to build a business in the music industry. I want to deliver content of some sort, or I need music in my game. I need music somehow in whatever digital product you're creating. So how do I navigate the complicated waters of licensing? And there's publishing, which briefly touched on. There's the recorded music rights, which in this column, it's all negotiable. And that's where I'm actually fairly busy, because fortunately there's a lot to negotiate. So if, in terms of going through each and every one of these categories, I think earlier to your question was, how do I approach a business when I first meet one, be it an Apple, Xbox, or someone much smaller, like a startup that came from nowhere? I think, the keynote was great. Jeff gave an incredible opening gambit to how to think about things. It really is about building a product, having a marketing strategy, and finally having a business. That's how I approach things from the get-go. When I first learn about any startup that comes to me and say, oh, I want to build a subscription service, I really want to understand what exactly is this startup talking about in terms of what's the product like, how is it going to compete against the competition, and what's the strategy to get it out there, and what's the business model, how are you going to pay the rights holders, etc. So if you can go through the other slides. I think this is pretty basic, starting with product. What problem are you trying to solve is one of the questions I always ask like, okay, so you have this new radio streaming product. How is it better than Pandora? How is it better than iTunes Radio? Or you have this game. What is it? Who is it targeting? So basically, these are just very simple questions to ask yourself as you develop your product and think about how to, launch it and how to grow your business. And so you think you have a business. Again, same, 101 basic questions to really, get buttoned up on and have answers for. How will you make money? What's your business model? How are you going to pay rights holders, etc. So I'm sure all of you have it's part and parcel of your business plan. But again, when I meet a lot of companies, and a lot of the companies that I meet, they're further along in their process. They already have a demo, a workable demo. They usually have investments already lined up or already fundraised. They've already fundraised. It's their VC who's introducing them to me, for example, or it's an established entrepreneur that comes through the doors, and it always helps to have a product demo. I mean, a product that's workable, even if you haven't obviously don't launch it without any content, or worse still, launch it without licensing the content, which has happened a couple of times with some startups I've met. But have a workable demo, a minimum viable product to show. Slides always help. And slides that are very concise, that just walk whoever you're talking to through your vision, your product, your strategies for marketing, and finally, a forecast of how you think you can do in the marketplace. And I think knowing what the business model that you're going after is very critical. In music business, I think it's fairly established that, going back to that first slide, there are many different categories of services that already have established either rates or established business models. And while it's somewhat negotiable, i.e., you can always negotiate the term of the deal, the territory. Things like the core economics are oftentimes pretty much standard. So, for example, a streaming service, there's always going to be a revenue prong of monies that are, of your gross revenue. So if you're a Spotify-like service, it's a $9.99 product. The economic model is always going to be, you have to pay music a percentage of your revenues from collecting that $9 or $10 a month from that particular subscriber. And then there are per play rates. In the radio space, Pandora pays Sound Exchange, so those rates are published. You kind of know what they are. If you're a small webcaster, it's a percentage of your revenues, for example. So those are all established rates. So start by knowing what exactly of a business you're building. So if it's a game, for example, sync. So sync licensing is, pertains to music that's attached to an audiovisual, that there's some kind of synchronization, right? So if there's like Tap Tap Revenge has been a mobile game that's used music and has been pretty popular. So that's a sync license where the rates are usually equal between recorded music and publishers. So i.e., the publisher gets the same cut as the recorded music rights holder. And then again, the apps. So like if you want to go back to that slide?
This one?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of hard to talk about all this without being extremely broad, because there's so many new digital business models in the marketplace today. And with apps in particular, there are ways there are many new categories. I think that are being invented on a regular basis. So it often helps to also hire a good business media attorney who can explain to you all the different types of rights that are invoked with different models.
So the interesting thing here to me, and I want to present this to the panel, is how do artists navigate the do-it-yourself opportunities, and when do you reach that threshold to decide, okay, I reached a point in my career or in my growth where I do need to leverage the relationships of a major organization like a record company or publisher or PRO, because it's time for me to take it to the next level. How do you navigate those waters? I know many artists these days, independent artists, are flooded with opportunities from do-it-yourself services, direct-to-fan services. So it's like, well, if I'm going directly to my fans, do I need a record company? Do I need a publisher? how do artists navigate those trenches these days?
Well, I think a lot of them try to do it themselves. I think at any point that you're actually going to sign a document, you need to hire an attorney. I mean, I just think that's just throw that out there. It keeps me in business, but by the same token, it's extremely important because it's much easier to deal with those terms at the beginning than it is to clean up the mess later, and it's a lot less expensive, I can assure you. So if nothing happens with your career, you don't have to worry about it. No one's going to sue you, but or they might not. I guess it's possible, but they usually go where the money is. So you want to take that precaution. But I think there's a number of sites. I think the Future of Music Coalition has some pretty good diagrams for showing, like this is how Spotify pays out the various rights owners, because Spotify pays out different people than Pandora does. They're very different services, and so I think knowing what rights you have to obtain in order to grant these rights to other people is extremely important. And it's gotten way more complex, in my opinion, over the last 5 years than it was, say 30 years ago. I mean, publishing has always been a bit of a hide and seek kind of thing to begin with for a reason, but I think people could manage it. And now there's so many, with digital rights, there's so many little subtle nuances that have to go into the various uses, that it's important to get a handle on that and not sign anything exclusively until you have someone that can show you, well, really this company that you just assigned this to, they're not a very good company. This contract may be fine, but they're not a great company for doing what you want them to do. There's this other company over here. And so I think it's important to go to functions like this, or like they stressed in the opening, meet people that have this experience and make sure you're asking the right questions, like, is so-and-so, is this really the best use of my material?
And David, artists that maintain the rights and are trying to do it on their own, and at which point in their career should they decide to move on and sign with a big organization to help them, or what are the challenges you're seeing out there for artists that are trying to generate revenue on their own by owning all of the rights themselves?
I think it's a complex answer. You can do the math and at your most basic level realize I can sell downloads of my album or CDs, if you still want to make those, for $10 a pop, or vinyl records, and if I do it myself, I can keep 100% of the net profit of this, and that's great. However, it's not a slam dunk in that direction. It depends on the artist, and it depends on what you're doing. And I am going to use an example, and they're real numbers because I've used this in class, and I know it's okay with them for me to talk about this. 2001, Drive-By Truckers self-released an album called the Southern Rock Opera. It's a double album. They sold these for $20 a pop out of their van. They sold 10,000 copies of this, so they grossed $200,000 doing this. And after the expenses of packaging, paying me to mix it, they had pretty ornate artwork with it, they wound up sticking considerably over $100,000 of cash in their pocket, selling something out of their van. A year later, the album was re-released on Lost Highway, which is a subsidiary of UMG. To this point in time, I believe that the UMG release of Southern Rock Opera has sold 130,000 records. Unless something has changed in the last few weeks, the next time that they actually have some cash that has reached them off of the 130,000 of these they've sold will be the first time that this has happened. However, 130,000 people owning something means that a lot of those people bought concert tickets, not once, but over the last 11 years, every time they come to their city, or they bought a t-shirt. And these guys are a touring rock band. And so, and trust me, I think this thing is really close to recouping. But the point is, and if you just look at the short view and say, whoa, hold on. If you can sell 10,000 and make $100,000 and 100,000 And net zero, why would you do it the other way? And there is a compelling logic to be made for the fact that, well, we want to sell the 10,000, we want the $100,000. But 10,000 people don't buy as many tickets, T-shirts, know about your next record, buy koozies, videos, everything else, buy into you and what you're doing as much as having 130,000 people know about it. If you were to ask them, and they and I have talked about this, and they've talked about this to my classes before, they may have done it a different way if it had been 2011 versus 2001, because the distribution channels for an artist now today, there's a lot more viability out there. At the same time, even now, it's not automatic, because when I was in high school in Atlanta, we had 3 or 4 FM rock stations and a local newspaper, morning and afternoon, and the Creative Loafing, and a couple of local indie rock magazines and college radio. So we had, and the national music publications. We had a highway of information about music that was 12 to 15 lanes wide in Atlanta, which meant it wasn't impossible to be aware of the traffic on all 15 lanes. However, if I-75 had 10 million lanes, there's a lot more opportunity to get on the highway than there is when there's only 15 lanes. Good luck. As Jeff pointed it out, you can't just fly it up the flagpole and see who salutes. There is a lot of work that goes into promoting your music, to marketing your music, to getting it out to the people. All this being said, there's tremendous opportunities for artists. There are great ways to get it out there now, but it's not just, I'm releasing it myself, I own everything, therefore 100% of a pie that's this big is going to be worth more to me than a slice of a pie that is way, way bigger. It can work out way better for artists, but for certain types of artists and certain genres, I'm not convinced of the old model. It's not dead yet, it's still kicking.